Good morning, everyone, and another chilly one at that. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. On the panel with me today are Ms. Tracy Anderson and Ms. Valerie Werhun. Our assessor today is Mr. Justin Mikulik. Our administrative person is Ms. Fran Picotto. My name is Bill Moretsky. I'm also on the panel and will be chairing this meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision via registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1, 4, and 5, and 7 and 8 on our docket today. Ms. Picotto, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Justin Mikulik.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Our first property on the docket today, item number 1, is 1590 Henderson Highway. This is an application for revision of the amount of the assessed value.
Okay.
Mr. Mikulik, you may begin your presentation.
Okay. File number 24-3093, roll number 040020271100, 1590 Henderson Highway, roll year 2025, the assessed value 18,710,000, classification 20, liability taxable. I do have a recommendation to reduce to 17,621,000. Would that be accepted?
Can I get the basis of that recommendation?
Okay, so I think the so page 11, a net operating income 995,566 at a 5.65 cap rate.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can do that.
Do you accept the recommendation, Mr. Navarro?
Yeah, I will accept that.
Okay, if you can just read in the any information that you haven't, important information that you haven't read in yet.
I think that's pretty much
Okay.
Yeah, like page 11. Page 11 will show just the net operating income and cap rate.
Okay. Any questions on that, Mr. Navarro? Presentation?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, any questions?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Werhun, any questions?
None, thank you.
And I have no questions. Mr. Navarro, you then officially accept the recommendation of 17,621,000.
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I don't believe there's anything necessary for summations. That then will include this property item 11590 Henderson Highway. We will then move to the next property on the docket, which is 1745 Henderson Highway. Item number 4. This is an
Okay.
application. Sorry, somebody want to say something?
That's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is an application for revision of the amount of the assessed value. Mr. Mikulik, you may begin your presentation on this property.
Okay. We have file number 24-2740, roll number 040021266600, address 1745 Henderson Highway, roll year 2025, assessed value 20,262,000, classification 20, liability T. I do have a recommendation on this one to reduce the value to 19,262,000. Would that be accepted?
Would you accept that recommendation, Mr. Navarro?
Just to get some background on it again, did you write it down on any specific page?
Sorry, yeah, I should have mentioned that. Okay, so page 10, I had adjusted the NOI downwards to 963,092, and I had adjusted the cap rate to 5% based on the property being renovated and operating under post-renovation conditions with low vacancy, based on the information through the mailers and the condition pictures of the property. So that would be my recommendation.
Mr. Chair, in this case, we can't accept it. I'm sorry.
Okay, on that basis, please continue your presentation if you have more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mikulik.
Okay, so we're back to page 1. We're dealing with a 12-story high-rise situated on Henderson Highway. Now, we have the year built being 1974, but there is an effective year built on this property because the property has been updated. There's 110 suites with 125 outdoor parking stalls. If you see on page 2, you can see where it's situated. So just north of Chief Peguis Trail on Henderson Highway with a whole row of other apartment buildings. It's a pretty good area for rentals. There's typically going to be standard market vacancy to lower than market vacancy running with a lot of these apartments down this alley as it is close to amenities, public transportation, etc. And if we go to page 3, I've disregarded our income workup because I have relied on the reported information on the property. So I will not touch on this page 3 or 4 because we aren't going to be relying on any of that information. In terms of capitalization rate, I did make an adjustment down from 5.2 to 5% to 5%. If you go to our page 5 where we have our capitalization rates, so multifamily, the range that we have for cap rates, which would be the 20th to 80th percentile. Now, properties can still fall outside of that range, but they range for us from 4.75 to 5.45%. And then you could see where the other brokers' reports would show their Q1 2023 cap rate projections for different types of properties, this being a high rise. You could see where high rise would fall in from between CBRE and Cushman Wakefield, and then multifamily high rise for Colliers between 5 and 6%, CBRE 4.75 to 5.25, and then Cushman Wakefield 4.75 to 5.50. Again, our range on the high rises we have as 4.75 to 5.45, 20th to 80th percentile. Now, furthermore, to the capitalization rate evidence on page 6, we have provided cap rates just to support the model ranges of value. This isn't necessarily to say that this specific, like this isn't used for this specific property as it says in the disclaimer. It would just show that model cap rates that get applied can be within that range of value. So we just feel that, well, I had felt that the model was a little bit high in this projection when I readjusted the property, and I would say that I did that based on having this property at 5%. I would think is completely reasonable given the fact that it is renovated, and the income stream, when you look at their reporting, would suggest that based on the repair and maintenance that's applied to the property and based on the steadily increasing income on the property, that it should be valued on more of the premium end, whereas some of the other properties would have, say, they're more renovating on turnover. So we know that there's still going to be a bit of a transient phase with the property before it starts to realize maybe that lower repair and maintenance expense bill and lower expenses with being able to demand higher rents with a little bit less discounts associated with them as well. So that would be my justification for dropping the cap rate to 5%. And I think that still fits in line with properties when you look at the CBRE and Cushman and Wakefield. I mean, this would be considered a pretty good high rise, I think, in their terms of the type of properties they're dealing with. On Colliers, it's the lower end too at 5%. Again, this would be considered, I would think, one of the better properties just because it has had a lot of those things taken care of on it. And so I mean, I feel perfectly appropriate in applying the 5% cap rate here. Just as a background, you could see on page 8, it just says the renovated block in the heart of family-oriented North Kildonan and features terrific amenities, surrounded area of conveniences, schools, shops, parks. There's a waiting list to get in. So again, demand is really good. And if you look on page 10, just given their income reporting, it seems like this property, I think, might have changed hands through a private equity transaction. So we don't have information on being able to speak about the sale, but it appears based on the page 10 and 11, you could see the income statements have changed from, say, Sunrex had been reporting in 2020, and I think this is now Globe now. For you could see for 10 and a half months in 2021 what the financials were on page 10, and then in 2022 you could see that they had taken over and vacancy being quite low, income being stable and increasing, repair and maintenance being on the lower end. And then page 11, if you zoom in, you could see the various years from, I think they reported 2017 income to 2018 to 2019 to 2020. You could see that income was steadily increasing and minimal rental discounts being applied. And the repair and maintenance I had shown here, you could see repair and maintenance also over the years, how that was at a reasonable level as well. So we think that the overall value recommendation that I had provided today would be appropriate for a revised market value. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions on the assessor's presentation?
Just a couple, Mr. Chair. The first question is that I note that the effective age was changed. Do you know how recently that was done?
I think it was, I don't have the exact date, but I think in the last, say, 3 or 4 years.
Okay. And exactly how was the effective age determined?
I didn't do it myself. We would have had somebody review the property that would have to apply their own appraisal judgment in that case.
Okay. So based on that, is it simply just a judgment call, or is it actually somebody going into a cost engine like Marshall Swift and actually making the adjustments to the property and then basing it on that, which is actually the proper way of doing it?
Yeah, I would. Okay, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Because effective age really is an element of cost properties. It's not so much an element of income producing properties. So do you know what methodology they would have used?
I wouldn't be able to speak towards that, so I could only speak to what I would have done if I had it. But
Okay.
What you say is appropriate. So I can't speak to how they would have applied that in this case, though.
Okay. Now, the next question is while we're talking about the issue of the effective age, would you agree, though, that the renovations themselves would be captured in the rent?
Yeah, I would say that that's very possible. Correct.
Okay. And those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. Ms. Werhun, any questions?
I do not at this time, thank you.
Ms. Anderson, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, so your actual NOI then you're using is the reported for 2022 from the owner, correct?
That is correct on page 10, 963,092. Yeah.
And you mentioned that the income was going up since 2020, is that correct? Every
Yeah,
year?
so I had applied on page 11, I had applied the mailer that we got from 2020 mailer. It's different reporting format, but they list from 2017, 2018, 2019. You could see the successive years of revenue. And so that's where I had just made the connection of the property being increasing.
So on this page 11, where does it have 2021 on here?
It doesn't, because 2021 is when I like I was saying, there was a private equity transaction that took place. So this property changed hands through privately through 2 different entities, right? There was no land titles document, because you could see in 2021 the reporting is only 10.5 months for the company that took over. So if you look on page 10, the 2021 is only 10 and a half months worth of revenue. So we didn't get an actual 2021 year.
Okay.
But you could see in 2022 where the revenue ends up, it's at 1637 to 51. So
Okay, I do not have any other questions then. So, Mr. Navarro, you may begin your presentation.
Okay. I'll actually ask everyone just turn to page 16 of the evidence. I don't think I need to explain the property again. I think the assessor did a fine job of that. So 16 is the overall income chart that we used. And it'll detail the income and expenses and the net operating income capitalization rate that we applied. So we'll start up top. The rent that we've applied is $1,566,862. So we looked at only 2 years in this case. We didn't have the full 2021. That wasn't a full year. So we applied the most recent year, which is $1,566,862. As I was talking about in my questioning of the assessor, that would contemplate that there have been updates to the property, and those would be captured in those rents. I've applied a 2.6% vacancy, and there are also miscellaneous income sources of laundry and parking, bringing the effective gross income to $1,601,270. And expenses are $653,776. That's for 40.8. Not much different than the assessors show. We get a net operating income of $947,493, and we've applied a 5.5% cap rate to this, bringing the income to $17,227,154. Now, our cap rate is based on our cap rate study that we submitted along with this. And we applied a 5.5% cap rate. However, I will note that there have been renovations done to this. So this property likely should have been on the lower end of our scale, which goes from 5.25 to 6.0. So I wouldn't have an issue going down to 5.25% on the cap rate. Based on our net operating income, and that would bring the value up to $18,047,488. So $18,047,047 rounded. And that's simply a judgment call based on, the property being renovated. It should probably be on the lower end of our scale. So apart from that, I don't think there's really much to go over. We've probably submitted some of the same information that the assessor has submitted. And we're good. I'm open for questions.
Okay, Mr. Mikulik, any questions on the applicant's presentation?
Just so you had applied market vacancy, even though they weren't running much vacancy, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think that's a deviation from any Altus agent that's presented this cycle. So yes, we would go with the market vacancy unless the vacancy was showing something higher than that. So yes.
Okay. So if it was higher, you would apply higher, you wouldn't use market?
Not necessarily in all cases. For example, if I saw just 1 year of higher vacancy amongst the 3 years that we typically look at, and sometimes we actually go back even further to show 5 years, I would not single out 1 year of high vacancy and apply high vacancy to that. So I would want to see consistent vacancy before I make that adjustment.
Okay. And just a question overall about the property. Are you aware if it did transact privately, or did it just change property management reporting? Do you have any information on that?
I don't. I can't answer that
Okay.
truth without getting some background on it. No,
Okay.
it wasn't flagged on our side. So usually when there is a sale, we're flagged on it. So I
Okay.
can't speak to it.
Okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, any questions? Ms. Anderson, yep, okay.
Sorry. I'm good. Thank you very much, sir. I was just thinking and I was looking over those numbers again quickly, but I think my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Ms. Werhan, any questions?
None, thank you.
Okay, so the if you can answer this question, if you don't, anyways, why is the reported income that the assessor have 963,092 and yours is 937 for 20? What is it? Sorry, 974. Yeah. Any you know what the discrepancy is there?
I'm sorry, I don't actually know what you're pointing to. Could you
Well,
tell me?
I'm just comparing the two actual reported incomes for the assessor's presentation and yours for 2022. And one is 963, which is the assessor's, and one is 974. So I'm just wondering if you know what that discrepancy is, because I think you have the same vacancy, or no, maybe you don't. Sorry. Where is that difference coming from? Do you know?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I hope I'm not sounding rude on this, but like the gross income that I have is 1,566,862.
Yeah.
The assessor's income is 1,831,843. So the discrepancy would be caused by the model itself. So the model is predicting a higher rent, and our rent is actually based on the actuals from 2022, which would have accounted for the percentage rental increase set by the rental board in cases
But
where
I'm not comparing that. The assessor used the actual reported, so he didn't use the model. That's all I'm getting at, is that the actual reported has a different income. Okay, so if you don't know what the reason is, that's fine.
I don't. I'm sorry, I don't.
So the other question I had is just more of an information. I see the hydro. I'm talking about page 16 here. The hydro values are there. Is that's typically in the apartments like this? Is that typically paid by the landlord, the hydro?
So as you know, most rents are grossed for apartment buildings. So typically the owner would be responsible for making all of the payments.
Okay. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Anything in summation, Mr. Mikulik?
No, I think we're okay on this one. Thank you.
Anything in summation, Mr. Navarro?
No, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, that will conclude item 4, 1745 Henderson. Our next property on the docket is item number 5, 1755 Henderson. This is an application for revision of the amount of the assessed value. Mr. Mikulik, you may begin your presentation.
Okay,
Oh, before you start, I believe it's just a cap rate only dispute on this property. Is that correct, gentlemen?
yes, I had checked ahead of time and the applicant is the same as us.
On the NOI, correct?
Oh, yes, sorry, on the NOI.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, if you can then proceed on that basis then.
Okay. So we have file number 24-2741, roll number 0400-212-8500, address 1755 Henderson Highway, roll year 2025, assessed value 6,580,000, classification 20, liability T. If we look here, it is a 3-story apartment built in 2021, so a new build with 29 suites and 46 parking. Now, if you look at the map here that I had provided, so it's on Henderson Highway. It's actually located right in behind 1745 Henderson. So again, I think this was a situation potentially when 1745 Henderson was taken under new management group that this was potentially part of the deal because this used to be a vacant lot in behind that building. So they built a new apartment on there, which was 2021 built. And so that's just to give a basis of where it is, same location that we've been talking about previously in terms of good area, good demand for rentals, etc. If we look here, so this is a cap rate discussion. So our cap rate we've applied here being 4.75%, and the fact that it's a newer construction. You could see that on our page 6, again, fitting into our cap rate chart, we're on the lower end of the 20th percentile. This would be a low rise A. I mean, CBRE separates their low rise A's, it's 4.5 to 5.25. Cushman's on low rise is 5 to 5.75. Obviously, the stocks for all of these type of buildings would encompass, like for Cushman would encompass sort of everything, whereas CBRE actually separates their low rise A and B's. So again, we don't feel like 4.75 in terms of that application is unreasonable in this instance. And again, based on our cap rate chart that we provide on page 7, there's a number of cap rates we feel that do support that range, even though not all of these are new construction, obviously, but that 4.75 being that it's a newer build, it should have a more premium rate on it. You can garner better rents. There's lower expenses. So we just think that 4.75 is appropriate when factoring in all of those matters. Now, page 9 just shows you, again, I just went to their website so you could get an idea of what the building looks like. So you could see that it does have the modern walk-up style construction, and then the suites are fairly open concept with the nice pot lighting and that sort of thing, right? You get a nice it says Traeger grill included, which I don't think that happens with many apartment complexes. But so they do have things that might make it a little more desirable for some tenants in that regard. And so you just get an idea of the floor plans here as well, what it looks like on the couple. I think this one was a 2-bedroom layout I had here on page 10, and then page 11, one of the 1-bedroom layouts. So this is a 1-bedroom with also a 1.5 bath. So you do get that as well. So I would say that it's makes it pretty desirable, a building of this matter. So and then I just posted some of their income statements. So they had a September 2022 occupancy, so they wouldn't have been able to report a full year of income. So I would imagine the income statement, just so you could see, would be from October to December, given where their occupancy date came into play. Other than that, I think that's everything. So that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions on the assessor's presentation?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Anderson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Werhunt, any questions?
None, thank you.
And I have no questions. Mr. Navarro, you may begin your presentation, please.
Okay, I think we can just skim over to page 16 and show. I'm not going to disagree with the assessor. I mean, this property deserves a premium in terms of the cap rate. Our premium has bottomed out at 5.25%, and that's what we've gone with. But realistically, with the there's no difference in the NOI. So really, this becomes just an issue of where you decide what the cap rate. And for properties of this type, we've set the bottom at 5.25. But I'm not going to dispute that this should receive a premium simply because of the age and location. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Mikulik?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, any questions? Sorry, Ms. Werhunt, any questions?
None, thank you.
Ms. Anderson, any questions?
Questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. Anything in summation, Mr. Mikulik?
I have no summation. Thank you.
Anything in summation, Mr. Navarro?
I don't have either. Thank you.
That will conclude item 5, 1755 Henderson. We will move to item 7, 1790 Henderson. This is an application for revision of the amount of the assessed value. Mr. Mikulik, you may begin your presentation on this property.
Okay, we have file number 24-2505, roll number 0400-208-4200, address 1790 Henderson Highway, roll year 2025, assessed value 13,039,000, classification 20, liability T. If we look at, we have a 7-story high-rise. Once again, this was built in 1984 with 96 suites. Ample parking, 105. Now, this complex, just to give you background, I had looked on page 2. It's actually one big complex that's divided into 3 separate roll numbers. So there is parking, there is ample parking for all units. I mean, I actually used to live in this complex for about 5 years. So everything is all shared, but we have, for our assessment purposes, divided it up to 3 different roll numbers. As what it is there's the high-rise building that you see as 1790 Henderson, and then the buildings around it, like 1792, 1794, are like they're basically 3-story walk-ups. So that does have a mix, but for this one in particular here, we're going to be talking about the high rise. Again, I just wanted to point out that the parking is sort of all encompassing of the whole lot. And now if we look here at the income value summary, so we have 61 1-bedrooms, 35 2-bedrooms for a total of 96 units. We have an average monthly rent at $1242.39. You could see the income work up from the model in this case, with our gross rents, with less the vacancy, getting the effective gross income of $1,394. Less a 49.96 expense ratio, to get the net operating income of $697,568. In this case, we've applied a capitalization rate of 5.35%, which again, I've discussed previously. It's probably leaning towards the higher end already, but I think in this case we can leave it as it is. Rent comparables here, so just some rent comps, just showing you where this property would fall in relative to the model. So these are from some various high-rise complexes throughout the market region, and so you could see that the rents aren't really out of place there either. So we feel that from an income side, that the model is relatively close here on that respect. Cap rate, we had already discussed where the high rises would fall in from based on the city to the other broker reports. Again, we're at 5.35 here. I would think that that's reasonably appropriate given the other figures as well. Now, just so page 8 just shows you now this property, they sort of run a thing where it's a renovation on turnover. So you're going to have some units that are updated and some units that may not be as updated. I don't have the exact figures on how many would be updated, but you could see just what they list here. So offers 1 and 2 bedroom suites of your choice of layouts. Features include some of them have sunken living room, wood burning fireplace, vaulted ceilings. Many suites are newly renovated, so they may have even renovated more than when I had moved out about 4 or 5 years ago. So this property located, and it is located, they do have units that do run along the river. So some of those I think might command a little bit more higher rents for that. There was a permit where they did do back in 2020. So they did some structural repairs and they were working on the exterior of the building and making sure the balconies were updated and met up to code. So that's where that permit falls into play. So you could just see on page 10, I just posted the first page of the actual permit. So balcony and masonry restoration. And if you see here, based on page 11, where they're reporting their statement of income, so this is for this specific high rise, you could see where they're running kind of a little bit higher vacancy in it looks like net vacancy loss than in 2022 than 2021, but they still brought in kind of the same levels of income, right? So we think, and since then, I mean, I had looked forward and the vacancy has gone down since that reporting. So we don't see an issue there. Now, page 11, the maintenance, they separated out from major improvements and their maintenance expenses. So you could see where the major improvements would lie. So those would be like a capital repair, which you could see what went into the building from just the permit value was around 1.38 million. So, you know, when I look at that from 2022 on page 11 to 2020 on page 12, how they have it kind of broken down. I had taken the average R&M, I looked at was 132,344. The average salaries, because the salaries number had varied quite a bit. There was a lot of fluctuation there. And I had taken average vacancy to get gross rents 1.272226, and then factoring in the parking being 1,269,054 for an EGI, and then the expenses using those average numbers along with their recent 2022 reporting on the other line items. I had kind of got an NOI of 681,669, and I know our model's coming in higher at 697,568, but given the amount of NOI, our model's actually relatively close. And again, the cap rate's already a little bit on towards the skewed towards the higher end. So I just think that in this case, we are appropriate, I think, to just leave this one as is, as I think we're still in a reasonable range here from what the model value had projected. So with that, that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions on the assessor's presentation?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Ms. Werhan, any questions?
None at this time, thank you.
Ms. Anderson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. Mr. Navarro, you may begin your presentation.
Okay, if everyone could go to page 16, please. And I'll note again that the assessor gave a good description of this property, so I don't think I need to go over it again. So on page 16, we can see that the income potential for the property is 1,272,226. Vacancy is 2.6. We'll note that there was one high year, but we ignored it, obviously, and went with the market rate of 2.6%. There is some additional income from parking, and the effective gross income is 1,285,208. We have an expense ratio of 48.4%. That's 620,258 in expenses, and a net operating income of 660,270. In terms of the repair and maintenance, we've stabilized it at 151,211. And you can turn to the next page, at page 2017. You can see that the average over 5 years, and typically for income and expenses, maintenance, we're looking at about 5 years. So you can see in 2018, they're doing quite a bit, and that is stabilizing over a few years. And so while we don't take an average of it, the average would have been 214,619. We did have a stabilized allowance that is slightly higher than, for example, the last 3 years. So that is how we got to 151,211. That said, it's not that far apart from the modeled rate. In terms of the capitalization rate, 5.75, given the location, the fact that some of these units have been updated, I'm not exactly sure about the count, but we probably could have gone down to the bottom end of our cap rate scale at 5.5 rather than 5.75. So based on the net operating income that we predicted in a 5.5 cap rate, that would bring it to about 12,000,005 rounded. And the only issue to us really the substantial issue seems to be the cap rate. But even then, there's not a substantial difference between us. So what I would recommend is a 5.5% cap rate and 12,000,005 rounded. And I'm open for questions.
Mr. Michalek, any questions?
You know what, I would accept that value, the revised value that Mr. Navarro is speaking of, and I think that would be fine.
Okay, you accept 12,000,005, correct?
Yeah, no, that's I think that's appropriate.
So you're making an official recommendation to reduce to 12,000,005, correct?
Yeah, no, I can see where the applicant's coming from in this case, and so we don't differ much on income, and so I'd like just for an agreement there. I think we could be reasonable with that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we frame this properly in our ruling. So
Okay.
if we say it's a recommendation by the city to reduce to 12,005,000, would that be acceptable?
Yeah,
It kind of fits in with our kind of process and procedures better,
Yeah.
so, yeah,
for sure.
okay. So I don't believe there's anything necessary in summations for each party.
Nope, I'm okay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't go through the question panel yet. Ms. Anderson, any questions?
I enjoy it when we have agreement. No questions, thank you.
Ms. Werhan, any questions?
None, thank you.
And I have no questions. Okay, I don't believe there's anything in summation necessary then. We can then conclude this item number 7, 1790 Henderson Highway. Now we'll go to item number 8, 1792 Henderson Highway. This is an application for revision of the amount of the assessed value. Mr. Mikulik, you can begin your presentation.
So we have file number 24-2506, roll number 0400-174-5900, 1792 Henderson Highway, roll year 2025, assessed value 10,938,000, classification 20, liability T, taxable. We have a 1984 year build. Again, this has 84 units, and this would encompass there on page 2 sort of the back lot. On page 2, you could see where it starts at like 1792 and then 1794, and then it kind of goes around as an L-shaped all the way up to 1804. So these are all, like I had said, the 3-story walk-ups for this class of building. Now there's 36 units, 48 2-bedroom, 80 to make and 36 1-bedroom, 48 2-bedroom to make up 84 total units for an average monthly rent of 1,078. And you could see where the gross potential rents come in with our model, less the market vacancy, and the effective gross income 1,058,735, less expense ratio of 45.76% for the net operating income of 574,258 and a 5.25% cap rate, and to get the 10,938,000. Now, I had found comparables of other low-rise apartments in the market region. So these ones would all have similar type of unit mixes as well. You could see where we're in line at 1078, not out of line with reported of other properties. Again, this is also a pretty desirable location as we've been speaking about. In terms of cap rate, again, 5.25 on the higher end of the low-rise Bs for CBRE, and low-rise we're on the kind of in the middle-ish for Cushman and Wakefield. 5.25 kind of smack dab in the middle of our model as well. Now, when we look at on page 8 is just the same picture because there's Rivergate Estates, so nothing changes there. When we look at the income statements, you could see that again, vacancy had gone up, but you could see that they still made more income. And then as well with the major improvements, you could see I've pulled those out, and I had averaged similar to the last one on page 10. So I averaged R&M from 2020 to 2022. I averaged the salaries, averaged the vacancy, So I got an effective gross income with average vacancy and parking being 1089,416. And with the expenses being 517,143, my NOI that I had kind of got was right in line with the model NOI. So I didn't feel a need that we were going to adjust this property, and so that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions for the assessor?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Werhan, any questions?
None, thank you, sir.
And I have no questions. Mr. Navarro, you may begin your presentation on this property.
Okay, if you would please turn to page 15. And again, the assessor has already given a background on the property, so we can see that the stabilized income is 1,117,939. We've applied a 2.6% vacancy rate to it. We do see a bit of escalation there, but we didn't feel necessary to adjust that. Effective gross income is 1,088,873. Additional parking income, effective gross income is 1,135,205. We have 558,606 in expenses. That's a 49.2% expense allowance percentage, and a net operating income of 576,578. So just a little slightly higher than the assessor. And we've put in there a 5.75% cap rate. As with the previous property, I think we could have probably taken this down to the bottom end of our scale, which is, I believe, 5.5 to 6.25. So if we do that, that actually brings the value up to 10,483,600 or 10,484 rounded, and that's based on a 5.5% cap rate. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Or what was the revised cap rate there again, Mr. Navarro?
It's 5.5%.
5.5. 10,484,000.
Yes.
Any questions, Mr. Mikulik?
Nope, I have no questions. And again, I'll say from the city side, that's a reasonable recommendation. You could go with that.
Recommendation to reduce to 10,484,000.
Yeah.
Okay. You accept that recommendation, Mr. Navarro?
I do.
Any questions, Ms. Werhan?
None, thank you, sir.
Any questions, Ms. Anderson?
None, thank you.
And I have no questions. Anything in summation, Mr. Mikulik?
I have nothing, thank you.
And anything in summation, Mr. Navarro?
Nothing from me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, that will conclude this item number 8, 1792 Henderson. And before I go to adjournment, I think as a point of order, I got to go back to the property where there was also the city recommendation. I think I missed a step here. So the city recommend item number 7, 1790 Henderson, if we can reopen that on the docket just for a moment. The city recommended a reduction to $12,005,000. Mr. Navarro, do you accept that recommendation?
I'm just going to flip right down to the page where I at, but I believe that is correct. Yes.
Okay. Applicant accepts then. Okay, that will reconclude item number 1790 Henderson. Okay. So that means we have heard all of the items scheduled at this hearing, and it is now adjourned. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Okay, have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.